totally gluten-free. Totally, there's no grains involved. It's chicken and eggs mixed together. That's it.
What about lactose-free milk?
That is often called acidophilus milk, and it's not on the allowed list in the g.a.p.s diet. To be truly lactose-free, it would have to be fermented, which would... Are you making it, or are you purchasing? Okay. I would say, the question was lactose-free milk. I would say no, just ferment your own. Because you don't know really how long they fermented it for. So, they're probably meaning cultured milk. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Not for now.
Well, I am just wondering why some cheeses are allowed when you're on full g.a.p.s and some aren't. Like, for instance, mozzarella, feta, also like the vinegars, like balsamic vinegar. There's a couple of things where you see it or see something that's similar to it, and vinegar's fermented.
Right.
So I'm thinking, why is balsamic not on there, and why only some of the cheeses but not all of the cheeses as long as they're raw?
Okay, that's a good question. She's asking about cheeses. I would recommend you reading the specific carbohydrate book to get specific details on the cheeses. In general, the harder the cheese, the more likely it is to be lactose-free. The softer cheeses tend to, I don't know if it's that they're not aged as long or what the process is exactly, but they're typically not completely lactose-free like the hard cheeses can be. However, there is a lot of experiencing people in g.a.p.s experience that they can never really tolerate any cheeses. So, and what, actually, this just rang in my mind what it is. The softer cheeses have a higher mold content. And so Dr. McBride says that some people just simply can't ever tolerate the molds in cheeses. Even though sometimes they're very beneficial for some people, it's the mold in the softer cheeses like brie and blue cheese and things like that that just can never be tolerated. And vinegar, I think the thing with balsamic vinegar is even the healthiest, most natural balsamic vinegar still contains sulfites. And those can be really toxic to the bowel while healing. Milk, there's something about balsamic vinegar that creates natural sulfites. I don't know. If I could get into the technical aspects of vinegar, maybe I'd find that they all have sulfites. But I think that's what the deal is with balsamic vinegar on g.a.p.s. So.
Okay, it seemed like this is a process. So how do you know when you're done? Is it just your symptoms, or maybe you talked about that earlier?
No. This is the art of g.a.p.s, not the science of g.a.p.s as to when you're done. I would recommend allowing at least a year, preferably 2, for healing. My daughter got to a point where, there were no more rashes, there were no more allergies. Her stools were perfect all the time, and they had been for months. I would allow yourself to be symptom-free for several months before you consider moving on. My son and I haven't experienced full symptom-free yet, so that's why we're going to stick on it. But I also noticed with her, it got to a point that emotionally, she was kind of digressing because she wanted to move on, and I was kind of holding her back. And as soon as I let her kind of start experimenting, we experimented with some, like sprouted fermented quinoa first, and then we tried sprouted fermented spelt. And I was crossing my fingers scared to try the spelt because she had reacted to wheat so much before, and it is like not even a problem for her now. She doesn't skip a beat. There are absolutely no symptoms for her. So I think be symptom free for a long time, and then watch your symptoms really close when you move on.
And then what's going to be your diet when you're healed?
You would move back to, my recommendation would be a Nourishing Traditions diet. So that's the question I get all the time of, so when you're done with this, you can eat whatever you want? And I'm like, well, whatever I want to eat is going to be very different than what you're thinking I want to eat. I don't ever want to go back to foods, like sugar, junk, standard American diet foods like that. I have no interest in that. But, theoretically, you could probably handle a little bit of that more so than, pre-g.a.p.s. But the idea is that you remain on a healthy diet, but you incorporate those grains and the beans and the vegetables that you cut out back into your diet. So body ecology would be a great transition diet if any of you have heard of that.
I'm asking for a granddaughter who has problems. She has arthritis and she has psoriasis. And I didn't hear you mention either one of those.
Okay, arthritis is a big one on g.a.p.s, psoriasis too. I probably said eczema, not psoriasis. Sometimes those two get lumped together even though they are different. Underlying cause is the same though. Any inflammatory condition in the body, which is what arthritis is, and typically psoriasis can be too, are addressed by g.a.p.s because it's a very, very anti-inflammatory diet. You have taken out the foods that are causing inflammatory reactions, which is typically sugars and starches. You've removed those entirely. Broth is one of the most anti-inflammatory foods on the planet. Broth is recommended for anyone with arthritis because basically what you're getting all the minerals from the marrow and the joints, those bones, and you're putting them in your body, and that's exactly what the joints in arthritis need, is that those minerals and those nutrients that help to build the joints. So when you make your broth, you eat all that stuff, that soft stuff, the fats and the soft stuff, that we blend it. We take any meat that was on the bones and any of that soft stuff, the fats, all of that, the marrow that's inside the bones, and we blend it, and then we drop a little drop in our soups, or we just eat it because we think it's good. But it's absolutely a wonderful idea for people with arthritis because of its anti-inflammatory properties. And really, just like we're talking about other diseases, this is beginning in the gut. This is toxins and lack of nutrients that begins in the gut.
So are you making a broth without the vegetables and stuff? You just make it with water?
Initially, we made it without any vegetables because my son was so reactive to onions and anything. He reacted, so we made it completely plain, but now we load it full of vegetables. I think the recipe I gave you, I think I said you could add vegetables in there, but one thing we do, like if we're ever peeling carrots or, the tops or bottoms of celery, we save all of our vegetable scraps just in a baggie in the freezer, and that's what we throw in our broths. Store-bought broth. If you buy it at Real Foods. Real Foods, you'll be so great. Actually, you guys weren't selling broth when we first started, but now you are. It's not going to be the same. No, it probably has at best, if it was even made with bones at all, probably maybe simmered for a few hours. The idea is the longer you simmer it, the more minerals you're getting out of it. I mean, we let our bones go for days. We'll get 2 broths out of them usually. Anyway, yeah, you want to let those boil until they are falling apart soft. So. Yeah, we add water, and typically what we'll do is we'll eat out of it. We'll boil some vegetables in it, or just drink it and add water as we go. But we'll get to a point. Usually, after I let it go for anywhere from 24 to 36 hours, I will actually drain it, put it in jars, strain it, put it in jars, and then I will fill it back up with water and do the whole process again. With the same bones, yeah. I found that it's a weaker broth the second time around. It's not quite as dark and rich and not quite as gelatinous, but it's still gelatinous, which means I know there's minerals in it. That's what you want. That's literally what gelatin is. And you'll see that with the broth, I'm sure. Well, it's been sitting out. Well, yeah, it's just a big old block of gelatin in there. So that's what you want. That's mineral-rich broth. You can do the same thing with chicken, but chicken you can't go days and days and days because those bones get softer faster.
So do you take it off the heat overnight and just let it sit there? Or
No.
leave it on the heat all night?
We leave it, or we just let it go. I have a gas stove that I just put on the lowest simmer. You bring it to a boil first, and then you turn it down to simmer. You make sure you skim the foam. As you're letting it come to a slow boil, there will foam will rise to the top. Make sure to skim that off. That's impurities that might be found on the bones. Skim that off, turn it down to simmer, and just let it go. I know those flat range tops, I can't think of what they're called. I don't think they can go for hours and hours like that. Hard tops, is that what they're called? Yeah, hard cooktops, that's what I meant. Okay, so you've been doing it. Okay.
I get worried sometimes.
Some people do it in a crock pot. So,
That's what I was just going to say. Have you ever done it in a crock pot? Because we know we can turn that on, leave it on all night and everything, right?
right. There, yeah, a lot of people make their broth in a crock pot. I threw my crock pot out because I saw it on g.a.p.s that it had like the highest lead content of any crock pot. So I'm like, oh, I'm getting rid of that thing. And I just haven't gotten around to getting another one. But I'm not doing that to make any of you go home and throw your crock pots away, okay? I told you, I will do extreme things. So I'm owning up to that right now. But there's lead-free crock pots out on the market now. But I think I gave you this resource. It's nourishedkitchen.com. She has a whole blog post on, it's called Perpetual Broth. And it's where you literally get a week's worth of broth in one crock pot. You just keep kind of doing what I was saying. You eat out of it and refill it with water, and eat out of it and refill it with water. And you can have broth for a whole week. Brilliant idea. I would highly recommend doing that. Nourished Kitchen. I'm pretty sure I gave that to you in the stage 1 at the end of the broth recipes. Nourishedkitchen.com.
What about a pressure cooker for cooking your broth?
A pressure cooker would be good. I know pressure cookers cook faster, but the point of broth is actually slow. So usually people like pressure cookers to speed the cooking process up, but what you want is the long, slow cooking to leach as many minerals as you can out of it. So I personally have never done it in a pressure cooker, but
I know when I've done chicken, the bones get really soft.
so maybe you're getting the minerals out in a faster period of time. I don't know. This is where we wish there was money to research things like this. But I don't know. Try it and see how gelatinous it gets. See how like gelatiny it gets, and then maybe that will tell you.
I just know we have a really good cook soon, and she makes broth, and it's great. What she does is boil the water, and then that scum comes to the top, and she drains the whole thing out off,
does she?
and then fills it up again, and then does the slow cook process, and that works well too. My question is kombucha. I'm kind of liking kombucha, and I can't find anywhere where that's approved or not on the g.a.p.s diet, but it has a lot of live enzymes in it. What do you think about that?
Kombucha is one of those things that really varies with, when you start reading blogs, some do it, some don't. Kombucha sometimes contains a lot of wild yeasts that the g.a.p.s bowel is not quite ready to handle. It also can sometimes be slightly alcoholic. I mean, you guys know what I mean in the fermentation process. Like, it's not an alcohol. You all get what I'm saying. It can have a very small alcohol content, which can be problematic. Like I know when we put my son back on some homeopathics, he had a little bit of trouble because of the alcohol preservative in the homeopathic. So some very, very sensitive bowels can have a problem with that. But even more so, it can be just the wild yeast in kombucha. But a lot of people on g.a.p.s, it's not listed as approved or unapproved. I think simply because she can't list every food. Body Ecology, they recommend coconut kefir instead of kombucha because to kind of maintain the wild yeasts. So I think watch your symptoms, see how you do, because it would be an excellent source of exactly what you're trying to populate your gut with. So if you tolerate it well, you don't notice adverse effects, go for it. So, yeah, I would add it in later, for sure. I would start with the fermented vegetable juices first and then move into that later.